Hello, sixth graders. It's Mr. Gardell. It's great to be back with you. I hope you're having a superb day. Today's video is going to focus on the terms for the Fur Trader Chapter 5. This chapter really starts to incorporate Europeans coming into the lands of Minnesota or present day Minnesota. Before that, though, it was primarily just the Dakota and the Ojibwe that were living in the lands of Minnesota, and from time to time, Europeans would come, but then they would go. With the fur trade, Europeans were coming into the lands of Minnesota and staying there. And so that's one thing to think about with regards to the fur trade. The other component to this is really what is the fur trade? Okay. And if we eliminate the word fur and just focus on trade, think about the trades you've made in your lifetime. Anytime you go to a store, for example, you are making a trade. Most likely, the trade is you receiving some good or service in exchange for money. But back then, money wasn't exchanged. So what was traded? The Dakota and the Ojibwe would receive European goods from the Europeans in exchange for furs. And beaver fur was the most highly prized, and we'll get to that as we learn more about the fur trade. So profit is one of the first terms for vocabulary terms, and really profit just simply means the money gained from the sale of a good or service after all the costs needed to make the sale are subtracted from the amount received. In other words, a lot of you over the years have had some type of, I don't want to say specifically a lemonade stand, but I'll use that as my example. But you, when you were younger, maybe even recently, okay, wanted to take some good and turn it into a profit. And lemonade stands, I know many of you have had in the past. So if you think about the lemonade stand that you may have had, think about what it cost you to start your lemonade stand. One, you had to buy the lemonade. Two, you had to buy the cups. Maybe you had to get ice. And then, of course, you needed a container to hold the lemonade. And let's just say hypothetically that all of those goods cost you $3. Let's say hypothetically, after you've sold out all of your lemonade, let's say that your total amount of money that you earned from people purchasing your lemonade was $15. Well, $15 isn't your profit. You have to take the $3 that you spent, right? The lemonade, the glasses, the container to hold the lemonade, take that money and subtract from 15. So in this case, it was $3. So your profit is $12. Resource is just simply a source or supply of a useful material. It can be anything, including fur, wood, or oil. Fur was a valuable resource during the fur trade for obvious reasons. A fur trader is simply used was a European or American involved in the fur trade. It often refers to a person in charge of a trading post. So if you think about a store in today's times, okay, whoever's in charge of that store, the owner, for example, okay, they are owning their store. They're in charge of their store. The fur trader was in charge of the trading post, and trading post simply means a store that, in this case, the Dakota and the Ojibwe could go to exchange furs for European goods. Again, it's like a store in today's times, right? We see all these goods in a store, except we take those goods off the shelf and then pay for them with money. Pelt is simply an animal skin with the fur on it. Again, the most highly prized pelt was beaver. Hunter is a person, usually a man, but not always, who spent most of his time hunting or trapping animals for food and for pelts. A guide is a person hired to help voyageurs and fur traders find their way through unfamiliar lands. Guides were unique because they knew the lands. They were familiar with the lands. Those were typically the Dakota and the Ojibwe. They could help these people from Europe, okay, the fur traders, the voyageurs, they could help them to navigate through these unfamiliar lands. Interpreters is simply a person who translates for people who speak different languages. And during the fur trade, you might have a Dakota individual speaking to somebody from France. Well, that person from France speaks French. The Dakota is speaking Dakota. Obviously, there's going to be some miscommunication there because they don't speak the same language. Interpreters, typically women, would be able to translate for that Dakota person and that person from France and have a conversation. And typically, the women, not always, would marry into the European or marry the Europeans and be able to pick up on that language, whether it be French or people that came from Great Britain. Clerks are simply a man who usually manage the day-to-day business at a fur trading post. Think of a clerk as a manager at a store in today's times. They simply are the manager. If you see their name tag and underneath of it, it has their title, manager. That's really what a clerk was. They were just simply managing the store or managing the trading post. A voyageur is a workman who performed the physical labor of the fur trade. As you can see in the picture on the right, they had to do a lot of physical labor, paddling those canoes upriver, downriver, upstream, downstream, not easy task. And when they got to the end of their body of water, a river, for example, they often would have to travel overland by carrying their canoes, carrying the goods that were within the canoes or inside the canoes. And then they would have to carry them overland from one body of water to the next. And sometimes that stretch would be miles. So voyageurs did perform the physical labor of the fur trade. All right. So those are our terms. And if we go back and take a peek at the first page of our vocabulary learning activity, okay, you simply just needed to write down, type your definitions to each of these terms in your own words. And then on the second page, what you need to do is to take the terms that are grouped together, guide and hunter, for example, and create a complete sentence. Notice how it said sentence, not multiple sentences, one sentence, and make sure that it applies to what we're learning or in the context of the chapter, and in this case, the fur trade. So I would say something like this, okay? When I went off hunting, I hired a guide to help me to find a great hunting location. I can't say that because I wasn't alive during the fur trade and neither were you. So again, apply it to, okay, make it applicable, I'll say, in terms of this chapter, in this case, the fur trade. I strongly, strongly encourage you to continue to submit this vocabulary learning activity and all learning activities to your HOA teacher, and then they can provide you with that feedback to help you to continue your growth and learning. As always, if you have any questions for me, please feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, contact your HOA teacher. Take care and have a great day.